Pokemon loves archetypes, and one of the most famous is the so-called regional rodent, the little rat normal types that pop up everywhere on the early routes. These Pokemon are often grouped together, but how similar are they? Right off the bat, while fans call these guys regional rodents, only about half of them are rodents. The other are various groups, so I prefer to call these guys early game commons. With that, let's get started. Generation 1 started it all with the most famous early game common, Rattata, and its evolution, Raticate. Clearly based on rats, both are pure normal types, with Rattata evolving at level 20. It's not a particularly good Pokemon, but it works well enough to get you through the early game. Gen 2 gives us Sentret and its evolution, Furret. Also both pure normal types, they are based on the ferret, a type of mustelid, essentially long carnivorous mammals. Sentret evolves at only level 15, one of the earliest in the region, beaten out only by the Caterpie and Weedle lines and Cyndaquil for some reason. It appears on fewer routes than Rattata, although it is more common on the route it is found on. It's pretty much there to supplement Rattata instead of replace it. Gen 3, Zigzagoon, and Linoon follow the same trends, being pure normal types that evolve at level 20, just like Rattata. They are somewhere between a raccoon, a badger, and a polecat, with all but the raccoon also being mustelids. They also appear pretty much everywhere early game, and pretty commonly too. Aside from Zigzagoon and the requisite bird and bug, Gen 3 is another Pokemon to the early game roster, Poochyena, a dark type. It appears on similar routes to Zigzagoon, but less often. In Emerald, however, it and Zigzagoon swap locations and frequencies, making Poochyena the de facto early game common. It evolves into Mightyena at level 18, just earlier than Zigzagoon. They are based on hyenas, neither rodents nor mustelids. This is the first time that Pokemon adds another early game option, but it won't be the last. Gen 4 gives us the ever-popular Bidoof, which evolves into Bibarel at level 15, the same as Sentret. Notably, while Bidoof is pure normal, Bibarel is normal water type, the first early game common normal type to not be pure normal the whole way through. These two are beavers, which surprisingly enough are actually rodents, the first rodent since Gen 1. Alongside Bidoof, Shinx is pretty much ever-present on Sinnoh's early routes, although not quite as ever-present as Bidoof. An electric type, Shinx is notable for evolving twice, into Luxio and then Luxray, the first time an early game common or something adjacent has done this. It also turns into Luxio at level 15, the same as that Bidoof evolves into Bibarel, so Bidoof and Shinx are clearly on the same wavelength of being early game options. It's also a cat, completely unrelated to the others. Gen 5 is nuts, introducing 3 candidates for early game common. The most obvious is Patrat, a pure normal type rat that evolves into Watchog at level 20. Alongside Patrat is Lillipup, another normal type, this one a dog, evolving into Herdier and then Stoutland at level 16 and 32 respectively. These two are the only Pokemon on the first route in Black and White, making them both strong candidates for early game common. Patrat fits the archetype better, but you really can't count Lillipup out. And then there's Purloin and Liepard, found just slightly less than the other two. A dark-type cat that evolves at level 20, it lines up with Poochyena, Shinx, and Rattata. Saying that Gen 5 has 3 early game commons feels wrong though. Like, it's not an archetype of Pokemon at that point, just a list of Pokemon from the early routes. If I had to pick one, I would pick Patrat for being the closest to the earlier ones in terms of type, inspiration, and evolution, but it's probably safer to say that Gen 5 just doesn't really have one. Gen 6 is super easy though, it's Bunnelby, a pure normal type that evolves into the normal ground Diggersby at level 20. The only notable things are that they are both rabbits, not rodents or mustelids, and that Diggersby is the only ground type introduced in Gen 6 other than Zygarde, a legendary. Gen 7 definitively has 2 early game commons, but unlike Gen 5 where it's weird, it works perfectly here. First is Yungoos, a pure normal type mongoose that evolves into Gumshoos at level 20, but only if it levels up during the day, and Yungoos can only be found during the day as well, because at night we have Alolan Rattata, a regional variant of Rattata native to Alola. It's dark normal type, which is an admittedly weird combo being both the primary and secondary early game common types, but whatever. It evolves into Alolan Raticate at level 20, but only at night, making it a perfect counterpart to Yungoos. Due to night being more prevalent in Moon and day being more prevalent in Sun, it makes the two feel like version exclusives without actually being them. It's just really neat and fully cements them both as Gen 7's early game common. Gen 8 gives us Squavit, a pure normal type that evolves into Greedent at level 24, quite high for one of these guys. Being a squirrel, Squavit is also a rodent, fitting the archetype perfectly. Finally, Gen 9 is pretty open world, which you think would make this tricky. And yet, one line easily stands out for fitting into this archetype. Lechonk is a pig, different from the rest, but is still pure normal type and evolves into Oinkologne at level 18. Aside from being a pig, it's pretty standard early game common to close things out. And that's all the early game commons. Aside from not all being rodents like people claim they are, the clear-cut early game commons are all very similar. Two-stage normal types that populate the early routes and evolve around level 20. Gen 5 is still weird for having 3 potential candidates, even if one is closer than the rest, and there are a surprising amount of dark types that supplement the normal types. Hell, Zigzagoon gets a dark normal variant in Gen 8, although it's no longer an early game common at that point. I think my favorite is Bidoof, for reasons, but I'm also a big fan of Furret, also for reasons. Honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of any of these Pokemon. None of them quite feel as cool or iconic as the original birds or bugs, outside of the memes. I do love Shinx though. I've been Raventry, and thanks for watching.